You're welcome to today's class on MCM 216 book publishing techniques. In today's class, we are going to take on the topic meaning, merits, and demerit of traditional book publishing. I am your course lecturer, Mr. Edikan Upon. Let's delve into the class. We are going to start this class today by defining traditional book publishing. Traditional book publishing is a publishing model where the publisher handles the creative process and distribution of a book on behalf of the author in exchange for a royalty that is paid to the author as compensation. According to Herbert in 2022, traditional publishing is when an author works with a mainstream publisher to handle the creative process and distribution of his or her work or book. When the author secures a traditional publishing deal, the publisher uses its connection to schedule interviews and events to promote and distribute the book. The publisher helps distribute the author's book to bookstores nationwide, with the author having to worry little. Good summarizes the traditional publishing concept by saying that traditionally published books are handled by a traditional publisher who covers the cost of editing and preparing the manuscript, which is the creative process, and the author often receives an advance against future royalty. Moving further, we have another definition by Allen in 2014, which states that traditional publishing occurs when a publisher offers an author a contract. Take note of contract because we have courses that we are going to discuss book publishing and the law, where we talk about contract. The publisher buys the rights to publish the book from the author, prints and publishes the book, as well as sells the book through booksellers and retailers, and pays the author royalties for each of the sale that is made. Bransford in 2024 describes traditional publishing as the classic process of publishing a book before the days of Amazon. When Amazon came up on board, it introduced a different publishing model, which we are also going to treat in subsequent class as we continue through this course. An author with a finished manuscript or a non-fiction book proposal must seek a literary agent to submit his manuscript to a major publishing company. But for small presses, the author can reach out to the publisher directly. A deal is negotiated. When the deal is accepted, this leads to the publication and the distribution of the book. That, let us look at the advantages or the demerits, the merits of the advantages or the merits of traditional publishing. The first is it lends credibility and prestige to the book and the reputation of the author. So being published by a renowned publisher lends credibility to your book, means that this book has been thoroughly edited, means that this book has quality, and it also gives the author a reputation of pulling up a standard book. It established publishers have connections to media outlets that increases the likelihood of the author and his or her book receiving coverage. Another advantage or merit of traditional publishing is that the author takes no financial risk while the publisher covers the cost of publication. So on the side of the author, there is no upfront payment to the publishing company. The author does not incur any loss, even if the book does not sell well, because the author, the publisher rather, takes full financial risk before the book ends any sale and even goes further to pay. Moving on, another advantage is marketing and advertising support. The traditional publishers take up marketing and advertising for the book for the author. Traditional publishers take up marketing and advertising of the book for the author. Also, the author enjoys expanded connection and a guaranteed bookstore distribution. Authors will gain more connections and an enhanced distribution network because the publisher already has established relationship with bookstores, increasing the visibility of this book, and it also tends to increase the potential of the book being sold. Traditional publishers, as we know, are heavyweights in the publishing industry. So they pull their resources, they pull their connections and back up the author they have published. Having established that, we can also see that as a result of this, the author does not need a big following to be able to sell his book, because the publisher already has a fan base that the author is leveraging on or can. After establishing that, we move on to the demerits of traditional publishing, or we could say the disadvantage of traditional publishing. The first of this class is that the author have little to say in the creative process. Publishers focus on marketability and might sometimes ignore the author's vision. As a result of this, traditional publishers, retain full control over content, the cover design, the marketing, and the distribution of this book. And they can, demand for edits or even refuse to publish a book. Sometimes, after an agreement, a contract has been signed, the author might be required to alter the manuscript in a way that might not be all conveniencing. So sometimes, it's not even sometimes, most of the times, the publisher takes control of designing the cover, laying out the content, and with this sometimes may not align to the preferences of the author. But since the contract has been signed, the author would have no option to accept this. All right. The next is the rigid publishing process. The rigid publishing process of the traditional publishing is another big challenge. Most publishers require submission through literal agents, and even high quality manuscript might be ignored if they do not pass through literary agents that are approved by the publisher. This raises up an issue of gatekeeping. This raises up a gatekeeping issue where the literal agent do not always recognize talent. We have issues and we have stories where um, books were rejected by literary agents, and the publishers, the authors, decided to publish these books by themselves, and they tend to have major sales on books that were rejected by the publisher. Also, the profit model of traditional publishing seems to be a big turnoff, for a big challenge also for traditional publishing, because it looks as if the publisher is making money from the author and not making money for the author. Like, take for instance, on an average range, the royalty can range between 10 to 15% of the cover price. So if my book is sold for 5,000, I only get 500 naira at 10% per copy. So this can be a challenge that they or to the process, a challenge of the process. Yeah, and the services that the publishers offer are often overpriced as compared to freelancers out there doing it. Another limitation is that of the marketing support. Since the publisher works on a very strict budget, it can sometimes limit the extent to which it could pull marketing support for the author. That brings us to the end of this class. But before we wrap it up, let's do a summary. So we established that traditional publishing is when a publisher manages the creative process, the marketing process, and the distribution process of a book, while the author earns royalty. On the merit side, we realize that it leads to credibility and prestige, guarantees bookstore distribution, there is no financial risk for the author, marketing and advertising support is in place by the publisher. However, on the reverse side, which is the demerit, we realize that the author can lose creative control of his work, and the royalty is relatively low, the payment is relatively low. Difficulties and slow publishing process can be another challenge. Then we see that marketing support, whether that is promised, can be limited. So thank you very much for joining our class today. It's a class on MCN 216 book publishing techniques. You can like this video if you've learned something from the class. Also comment. You can comment question, you can comment input, you can comment area that you want us to make improvement. This is a class and we're taking all inputs and suggestions as well as questions. Can do well also to help us share the link of this class to mass communication students around you or people that are interested in knowing more about book publishing. If today is your first time of joining our class, it will be important that you subscribe and also turn on the notification button so that you don't miss out when we will be having our next class session. Once again, thank you very much for joining the class. Until I meet you again in the next session, I remain your lecturer, Mr. Edikan Okbong, saying cheers.